Hello, Vibers, and welcome back to the Vibe with Kai podcast. Today, we are in for a treat. From film journalism to lighting up the comedy stages of London, our guest today is none other than the legend, Alfie Noakes. Alfie is a former film journalist who transitioned into the eclectic world of stand-up comedy, eventually carving a niche as a comedian, promoter, and renowned comedy coach. With over a decade of experience in the bustling London comedy circuit, his shows have become a staple and drawing in crowds every single night of the week, showcasing both budding and establishing comedy talent. His profound observations on neurodiversity within the comedy community has led him to champion a unique perspective on the connection between comedy and mental health. As the visionary behind the We Are Funny project, Alfie has nurtured over 1,000 comedians through his transformative workshops, online courses, and personalized coaching sessions. Above all, Alfie's mission revolves around emphasizing the power of laughter and its therapeutic potential, ensuring that every comedic voice, no matter how divergent, finds its place on the stage. Please welcome my friend Alfie Noakes. What's up, man?
Hi, man. Thanks for having me on the show.
Did you like that intro? Did you like how I did that for you?
I thoroughly enjoyed that. You covered a lot of territory there. It makes me sound extremely interesting. I appreciate that.
I think you are very interesting. As soon as you sent me an email and you were like, "Hey, this is who I am," I think I would be a good part of your podcast. I was like, and I'm like reading. I'm like, yeah, oh my God, no, this would fit perfectly, like into what you stand for, what I'm all about. And at the end of the day, just trying to make people have a little levity, find a little levity in this dark world that we live in today. So thank you so much for talking with me. I want to get right into it, man. You mentioned that in one of your bios, I saw that you see a lot of neurodiversity in the comedy community. Can you elaborate on that? What do you see from your angle?
Well, the fact is that people are neurodivergent by definition approach the world from a slightly different angle, whichever way you consider that to be. If I had to name one scenario, probably autism is particularly common. And autistic people, obviously, there's a spectrum, but they see the world from a different angle. And many of them are able to kind of transpose that and turn it into comedy. Some of my favorite acts, some of the more impressive acts, are very open about their autism. Some, I suspect, don't even know they have it. And I'm no doctor, I can't diagnose it. But I've seen enough of it in the past to be able to see that people can take these slanted views of the world, which is just wonderful fodder for comedy.
Right. And I think it's a common ideology and thought out there. Well, maybe it might not be as common as you and I may think, I guess, but I know that it's a very well assumed thing that there's a high percentage of comedians that address their mental health on stage without even the audience really probably even realizing that they're addressing their mental health on stage. How do you, when you're doing your coaching sessions with comedians and all of that, how do you get them comfortable enough to discuss mental health and their life on stage and finding a way to make it funny in a way?
Well, let me be clear. I've never taken that angle when I'm coaching somebody. The way it typically begins is they send me a 5-minute or a 10-minute video of a performance,
right?
And then I'll break it down, acknowledging things such as there's been too much of a gap between punchlines. Maybe here's an issue you haven't drilled into deeply enough. So I don't necessarily coach on that angle at all. I really don't. But what I will often observe is there's kind of two avenues that comedians who are neurodivergent might take. Sometimes they decide to make it a topic to speak about, in which case I would just coach them in the same way as I would anybody else, which is very often about, well, let's go deeper into that. What's that like? What would be a parallel to that? Can we get a human story that you've experienced? You might find ourselves exaggerating it for comedic effect. We can go that way, but the issue, the mental condition, is up front and center and being spoken about openly, and that's become much more common in certainly the last decade. Right. And other people, there's a hack joke in comedy, where the comedian will maybe reveal something rather personal and say, just so you know, folks, this is my therapy. I can't afford a therapist. I don't like that line. I encourage people never to use it. It's hack, it's overused. But if they don't add that line at the end and they're sharing something and being open and personal, so long as the jokes are there, that's a perfectly clear avenue. What I'm not fond of, and I see occasionally, are comedians who will make some kind of personal pronouncements, but there's no joke attached. It's a statement of fact. I have ADHD, I have bipolar, It could be something about their sexuality. They just announce it, but there is no joke there. There is no insight. There's no observation. There's no human story. And really, that's not comedy. That's just a pronouncement. So I would always encourage, if you want to go that route, it's your story, it's your stage time, any way you like, but there must be jokes attached. It is, after all, comedy.
Right. And so what about you personally, right? How do you find the ability to just to make people laugh yet still stay truthful without it necessarily being like pronouncements, as you were saying? How do you find a way to find your sense of truth while still doing the job of entertaining people? Do you find any difficulty in that? And if so, what do you struggle with the most?
No, I don't find any hardship with it. I am absolutely first and foremost an MC, not really a comedian. I did a few gigs many years ago, but I found my home as an MC and as a promoter and a booker and ultimately a workshop runner and a coach. But as an MC, I will tell stories from my life. What I'm trying to do is, when the act is on that I've just introduced, I'm listening very closely to what they're saying, but I'm also paying close attention to what the audience response is. And then I set a challenge for myself to try and find something funny to say that relates to something the comedian just spoke about. So there's like there's a segue there, there's a flow. And if the comedian's done brilliantly as an MC, my job is just to bring down the energy a little bit, give kudos to that act who did so well, but bring the energy down just a bit, reset the room so that the next act comes on to a fair playing field. So telling stories from my own life is really very much my domain as an MC. Sometimes it veers into very personal territory, sometimes just pure silliness. It depends on my mood. It depends what the platform of the act on before me was. You know, everybody's got their own stories. I often will teach new comedians or people thinking of giving comedy a go, because I believe it's got a lot of value in building self-esteem. It can also be a rocky road if you have a hard gig. And some people don't have, you know, the emotional balance to necessarily take that on. So it isn't for everybody. But for those who persevere, it's a wonderful opportunity to build self-esteem. And what I'll often teach is, rather than just going to a blank page and trying to figure out what funny things you can write down, that's not a way to approach it. Look at notions of your firsts and your worsts, your first job, your worst date, the worst holiday you've ever had. Just list those things down. Inherently, there's funny things in there. People are a little bit more inclined to laugh at the misfortunes of others, as is the history of comedy. Slapstick and onwards, you know, the Three Stooges and everybody. Somebody falls over, you know, custard pie in the face and onwards.
Schadenfreude at its best, right? Schadenfreude.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. And obviously that can be delivered by the comedian in their own voice, in their own tone, in their own reality, always with the option to exaggerate and manipulate the tale. So yeah.
What are your thoughts on do you think that comedians should ever speak about something that they don't have to personally deal with? Like, for example, like I myself, I'm diagnosed with ADHD, depression, anxiety, right? Do you think it's fair of me to speak about people with, like, let's just say bipolar or OCD and make a joke out of that in a way? Do you feel that that's crossing a line, or do you think that people should just stick with what they have to go through?
I'm entirely of the opinion that everything is open to comedy, everything. However, we need for audiences to understand, well, first of all, I'm constantly shocked about how often audiences seem to believe everything a comedian says on stage is necessarily true. That's just craziness. It really is. You know, people coming in through a door under the sign comedy club, you know, it's not all confessional. It is designed to make us laugh. And therefore being ridiculous and surreal and all these elements is part of the ingredients. So the target of the joke and the subject of the joke are very often two different things. So I don't believe people have to necessarily stay in their lanes. Men can make observations about feminism, for example. If they're being horrible about it and just bad, then that will speak for itself. You know, it really does. So it really is up to the audience to have some understanding of, was there viciousness meant behind there? Or is there almost a satirical take on this, where you've taken a standing cultural assumption and being able to spin it on its head somehow and give us a new take into honesty. My favorite comedians historically, the George Carlins, the Bill Hickses, you know, even today, Bill Burr, current comedian. Very often when I leave the show, I'm like, oh, I've got a new opinion on that, or at least I need to dwell on this a bit. I'd assumed X. They've just pointed out to me Y exists. Now, I don't believe comedians have to stay in their lanes, but it does make, to a larger extent, to speak from one's own experience.
Right. You talked earlier about like self-esteem and you know, it kind of alludes to like the bravery side of stepping onto a stage and just putting yourself out there and things like that. I know that you're like an MC, but that still comes with its nerves and like you were talking about personal things that you might bring up sometimes and in relation to the comedian that was just up there or is coming up and things like that. But how do you handle your nerves, your anxiety, your fear when it comes to stepping onto the stage? What is your thought process before you step out to start the show?
To be honest, I've been doing it for so long, and I MC in my own room. I don't suffer from those nerves anymore. I haven't for over a decade.
Yeah.
Where I can speak to this is when I'm coaching with new students, and that's one of their probably the two issues that come up the most with comedy students. And for example, just to demonstrate this, you know, I run a workshop about clowning. I don't teach it. My good friend Dave Thompson teaches that. Dave played Tinky Winky in the Teletubbies.
Oh,
just
nice.
As an aside, okay, so he knows about clowning.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, so I run all of these workshops. I teach a few myself, but many are taught by other professionals. And it almost doesn't matter what the subject is. The students always want to ask about hecklers, for example. And hecklers are extremely rare, but it's just something to address them. Look, it's not something to worry about. But everybody is anxious about doing comedy, particularly in the early days. It is nerve-wracking, which is why it's so valuable in the early days. Those first gigs aren't really, in my honest opinion, about getting big laughs. If you can get a few laughs, you're doing great. What it really is about showing yourself that you've got the courage and the guts and the gumption to get up on stage and do it. Once you've shown yourself that, then the easier part is adding the jokes that come later. And there are certain tactics that you can apply to managing those nerves. One I point out to my students is, describe to me in your body where you feel fear. You know, what's the actual physical symptom of the fear and the nerves you're enduring? They give me whatever answer they have. They're usually rather similar, student to student. And then I ask them to do the same. Now tell me what excitement feels like. If you're about to say get on a roller coaster, or you're going on a first date with somebody you find especially attractive, and you know you're going to try and do the best you can. And the physical reaction is almost the same. Nerves and fear and excitement are very close to one another. So I try and teach my students to try and shift from what they consider to be fear to excitement. And then, of course, there's basic breathing exercises and the like. But the fact is, it's just having the courage to get up there. Most people don't have the courage to get up on stage. They just don't, which means the second you leave the stage after your first gig, you've just entered an elite group of people that have the courage to do not just public speaking, but public speaking to strangers with a design to make them laugh. That's no small thing. And forever and a day, you'll be able to carry that away with you and have a sense of pride when you think back on it.
Yeah. Do you I know this is an age-old adage here, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, do you feel that laughter is the best medicine?
No, I think probably antibiotics are the best medicine.
I was hoping you gave that answer. I want to set that one up for you.
No, laughter is a medicine amongst many elements. I mean, I got into comedy at an incredibly hard time in my life. I was bankrupted after the 2008 banking global economic downturn. So I was in a very bad place at the time. And what came afterwards was what kept me going. I made a brand new bunch of friends, fascinating people, discovered this new community, and, you know, gave me a real focus of things to go through. But no, it's not the best medicine. It is a medicine, and it's really quite potent.
Right. From an audience perspective, like, because I know we talk about like the comedians a lot, and we'll continue to talk about that in a second, but from an audience perspective, why do you think people turn to comedy so often when they feel like they're missing something? Why do you think we turn to, like, not even just stand-up comedy, but just like TV shows and movies and stuff? Why do you feel like that's always the easiest thing to turn to, as opposed to maybe watching a sad movie where the guy is going through the same shit that you're going through, and so stuff like that? Why do you feel like it's always easiest just to turn to comedy?
Well, not just comedy, but it's entertainment. It's one tier of the entertainment spectrum, and it's been described as the opiate of the masses. You know, real life is hard. We all know it. So if you can have something that takes you out of it for half an hour, an episode of a sitcom you love, or 50 minutes of an album that always gives you something, Marvin Gaye for me, or whoever it might be. And if you can have a whole evening out, you know, whether it's a visit to the movies to see Barbie or Oppenheimer right now, that's 2-3 hours of your life where you just get to forget all your troubles, and this is what you get to focus on instead. Comedy is an incredibly live, vibrant experience. Any comedy you watch on television, on a screen, in any form, is always something in the region of 70% less than it was in the room that night. There's an energy here for the live experience, which is much more akin to a music concert other than, say, the cinema, even though I just drew that parallel. It's a chance just to take a break from the grind of real life. And where else are you going to have more actual fun, where you are laughing out loud routinely, minute after minute, for an entire 2 or 3 hour show?
Yes,
it's magnificent.
Yes, Oppenheimer was hilarious. I'm kidding. No,
yeah, it was a laugh an hour, wasn't it? A laugh an hour.
It's funny because as you brought up Oppenheimer as an escape, I was thinking like, yeah, man, escape the world of the issues of today. Let's talk about the issues of yesterday, just a little bit.
Yeah, but whatever it might be.
Yeah, no,
serious,
I know what you mean. Though,
whether it be serious or comedy, you know, I used to make documentaries. I'm a huge fan of documentaries. I watch many documentaries on very serious subjects, often grim subjects. But the fact is, for an hour and a half, I was out of my own life and focusing on this story, this issue. But nothing's more probably alleviating than laughing, you know, 3 or 4 times a minute for a couple of hours. That's an extraordinary experience. And there's an energy with the room around you that just can't be captured on camera.
Right. Like, speaking of comedy captured on camera, do you feel that the world of comedy has changed at all since the introduction of like TikTok and Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, and like this short form content that's really taken off the last couple of years? Do you feel that comedy has changed at all because of those platforms?
I must say I'm not particularly plugged into those social media platforms. I'm more of an old media guy. I worked in television for 13 years. I worked in radio. Of course, I'm familiar with them. I have a teenage son. I think more often than not, it's a platform for the comedians to drop some of their very best jokes, show that they're good, and build up an audience and come and buy tickets later, raise a profile. What I do fear a little bit is the open mic comedians, people maybe within their first 5 years, they spend as much time formatting for the right aspect ratio and trying to get likes and follows, when it's by definition, you know, your earlier stuff often isn't your best stuff. You're going to leave this stuff out there. If you spend that time trying to get followers and likes on actually writing better jokes and gigging more often, then after however many years, you're going to have a much higher standard of material, and you're not going to be haunted by what you did 5 years later coming back to you when you weren't quite as good.
Right.
I mean, Joe Rogan's shown that you can have a long form show and people have that attention. We just spoke of Oppenheimer. That's a 3-hour movie, and people $700 million it did by the end of last week. So people have the will to do it. I think it's an appetizer. It's like the movie trailer, but it is no replacement for seeing the structure of the longer form show, the energy of the room, and it also sadly leaves out a certain type of comedy, which is more storytelling, which is where you weave somebody through an adventure that lasts 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. That doesn't really lend itself to the TikTok format. So it's got its place. I'm not being a grumpy old man about it. It's got its place. It's another element, but it's nothing close to the experience of coming to a live comedy show.
I will 100% agree with that, actually. And there's actually been a number of comedians that I've followed on some of these platforms where they're funny on the platform, but then I see them in person, and it's just like a different vibe. It's just different feel, and it doesn't seem like the person that we saw that was on like a curated, highly edited, you know, comedy thing. Not saying that they're not funny. It's just like a different feel, and I could tell that some people were, I don't want to say disappointed, but they were just like, okay. And I found that really, really interesting. And I'm curious, like, and the way you just phrased it makes perfect sense. You know, a lot of them are either just getting started or they're just being found. And it's a new world for them. And so I'm very curious to see how they like take that feedback from the audience and then continue to grow as comedians. I love that kind of stuff. I love watching comedians like grow from like where they were to like where they are in the future. Like, I love watching that stuff. I think it's great. And speaking of that, yeah,
that's probably where my specialty comes from. I've been
right.
running open mic rooms for 13 years. So I've
Right.
watched over 500 people do their first gig. I've
Yeah.
staged about 10,000 different people, and I've
Yeah.
had this kind of close view of what it takes for them to build through. Some people disappear in the first year. Some people learn the hard lessons and they keep on plugging away. And those guys and girls have moved on to, you know, professional status.
Right.
It's a broad church comedy. It takes all sorts, and you know, those who win will persevere.
Right. I want to make sure that before we go, we talk about the We Are Funny project, because I think that's really, really cool. What led you to start this, and where can people get more information about it?
Well, the hub of everything is the website. That's wearefunnyproject.com. We run a couple of shows a week here in London. Luke and Paul are now the resident MCs in the house. During lockdown, I created 2 online courses, one for beginners, people either thinking of starting comedy, or what I consider phase 1. It's that first year of comedy, probably up to about 100 gigs, approaching your first top 5. So if you're early days or thinking of starting it, that's a course called Stepping Into Stand-Up. And then I did one for MCs. And then most recently, I kind of drew, while I've been coaching, what I find really interesting is I'd often teach comedians, look, you're the world's lowest budget film director. You're coming up with the images, the ideas, the stories, the hooks, and then you're planting those images in people's minds. And then I realized, because I was a film journalist, that that concept extended even further. New comedians are not just their own producer, director, story, but they're also their own leading role. And then they're also going to have to navigate all sorts of aspects of things that film production has to deal with as well, whether it's hair, makeup, and wardrobe, marketing and publicity, critics, reviewers, competitions, agents. It's all there. So I created this course for advanced comedians, people certainly past their first year, which will hopefully show them how to generate more material, come up with fresher ideas, but then navigate the scene all the way through to being able to get their own agent, at which point the agent should be able to look after them. I'm running regular workshops here in London, and then there's a blog. I write a couple of blogs a month, lots of free information for people there. So the idea, it's called We Are Funny Project, because 13 years ago when I set it up, I knew it was going to be more than just the live shows then. And so it is workshops, courses, and all of these resources for comedians.
Right. And for anybody that's listening or watching right now that is interested in getting all that information, I'm going to include the links to everything that he was just talking about in the description of this podcast. So that way all you have to do is click. Legitimately go check it out, because especially if you are a comedian that's looking, or if you're somebody that's looking to get into comedy, if you're even just curious, if you want to dab your foot in the water and just see if it's a thing that you would enjoy, this is the person you want to reach out to. This is because there's a wealth of knowledge here that can help you. And with that said, my last question for you is this: there's probably going to be young and or aspiring comedians, people that are looking to get into comedy, that are listening to this right now. If they're on the fence, if they feel like, I can't do this, I don't know, but I really want to, but I don't know if I can. If they're thinking that right now, what would you say to them?
Then you absolutely must do it, because it's something, it takes 5 minutes of your time for that 5-minute set, except it doesn't. You're going to write some material beforehand. It gives you some joy in the creative process. But remember, most of the night you're in that room, you're going to be observing people who are trying to make you laugh. You know, most people's first gigs don't go great. As I already mentioned, it's really just about doing it. Okay. Worry about getting jokes later. Okay. But you're going to very quickly find a very friendly, creative community. And 95% of the time you're at one of these events, you're going to be laughing anyway at the other comedians. Very quickly make friends. There's a circuit. There's usually only a certain amount of gigs in an area. Very quickly you meet this new community of people, and those friends are formed very fast, very quickly. And may I say this as well, actually?
Yeah.
It might not feel like this, but the truth is, if a gig goes badly, nobody cares anywhere near as much as you do. Okay. I've run so many nights where the acts have done very well throughout, but I do know this: at the end of the night, I've heard so many kind of audience members leaving the room, and one will ask you that, who did you like the most? They never remember a name. They'll just go, the tall guy with the, you know, bright red shirt. He was my favorite, when you're at the entry open mic level. So while it feels so important to you, it isn't to anybody but you, which means you can get over it quickly and return to it. And, you know, experience breeds brilliance, as with so many things. So as Nike greatly said, just do it.
Just do it. Just get out there. Just give it a shot.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Dude, Alfie, thank you so much. Like, this is a wealth of knowledge, and I would love to have you back on one day, because there's some more questions I want to ask you just about the state of comedy in today's world that I would love to get your insight on. So I'd love to have you back on one day in the future. Honestly, friends.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. My friends, if you are interested in the We Are Funny project, if you're interested in Alfie Noakes, all of the information is going to be in the description of this podcast. Just click, go visit, shoot him an email, shoot him a message. He'll answer all the questions that you have. It's going to be worth it, I promise you. Massive thank you to Alfie Noakes for sharing your wisdom with all of us listening and watching today. Remember, all of you out there, no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through, a laugh can help change your perspective. Honestly, I know I personally learned that a long time ago, and I'm happy to continue to spread that. On my platform, where I do try to find levity in situations that we find darkness in. So I want to continue to help make people feel better and validated, and help them know that they're not alone. So my friends, keep vibing, stay strong, continue to make the world a brighter place using laughter. Catch you on the next episode. As always, my friends, much love, good vibes. I'll talk to you later. Bye.